The spring of 334 BCE presented Alexander III of Macedon with a problem of mathematical precision. Before him lay the Granicus River, a modest watercourse flowing through the Troad region of northwestern Anatolia. Its banks, however, were lined with 40,000 Persian cavalry and infantry under the command of Memnon of Rhodes and the regional satraps. The Macedonian king, 22 years of age, commanded an expeditionary force of approximately 37,000 men of force that represented not merely an army, but the culmination of his father Philip's military reformation. The tactical dilemma was elegant in its simplicity. The Persians held the eastern bank, a position of natural advantage. The river's current, swollen by mountain runoff, created a killing zone approximately 4 meters wide and chest-deep at its center. Any crossing would require his phalanx to wade through water while Persian cavalry waited on elevated ground, positioned to strike downward at exposed formations. Standard military doctrine of the era dictated a flanking maneuver or a night crossing to avoid such unfavorable engagement geometry. Alexander rejected both options. His decision to attack frontally, immediately, and in daylight represented a calculated violation of tactical orthodoxy. The reasoning was not emotional impetuosity, as later historians would romantically suggest, but strategic necessity. His campaign operated under severe logistical constraints. The Macedonian treasury, depleted by his father's wars, could sustain this expeditionary force for precisely 90 days of active operations. Every delay strengthened the Persian position, allowing time for the Royal Roads communication system to summon reinforcements from Babylon and Susa. The Persian defensive formation reflected their military culture's emphasis on cavalry shock action. The satrapal forces Arsites of Hellespont in Phrygia, Spithridates of Lydia, and Mithridates, son-in-law to King Darius III, had positioned their cavalry in dense formations along the riverbank. Behind them, Greek mercenary hoplites under Memnon's command waited in reserve. The Persian tactical concept was straightforward: allow the Macedonians to become disordered in the crossing, then overwhelm them with cavalry charges while they struggled to reform ranks. Alexander's counter-design exploited a fundamental asymmetry in the opposing force structures. The Persian cavalry, while numerically superior, lacked the combined arms integration that defined Macedonian tactical doctrine. His plan required 3 synchronized elements: a diversionary attack to fix Persian attention, oblique advance by his companion cavalry, and immediate phalanx support to prevent encirclement. The Macedonian order of battle reflected years of institutional refinement. On the right wing, Alexander personally commanded the Royal Squadron of Companion, cavalry approximately 250 heavy horsemen equipped with the Zeiston, a 4-meter cornelwood lance designed for cavalry shock combat. These were not merely riders, but products of systematic training in wedge formation tactics, capable of maintaining cohesion during charge and subsequent melee. To their left extended 7 additional companion cavalry squadrons, approximately 1,500 men total, forming the decisive striking arm. The phalanx occupied the center 6 brigades of Pesateroi, the foot companions, approximately 9,000 men arrayed in files 16 deep. Each carried the sarissa, the revolutionary 5 to 6 meter pike that transformed infantry warfare by creating a layered hedge of spear points extending beyond traditional hoplite weapon range. The sarissa required 2 hands for manipulation, forcing the abandonment of the large hoplite shield in favor of a smaller buckler strapped to the left forearm. This trade-off reduced individual protection for enhanced offensive reach and formation density represented Philip's fundamental insight into infantry mechanics. On the left wing, Parmenion, Alexander's senior general and his father's most experienced commander, led the Thessalian cavalry and allied Greek infantry. These forces, though competent, served primarily to fix enemy forces and prevent envelopment. The true innovation resided in the offensive conception of the right wing as an independent maneuver element. The engagement opened with a feint. Parmenion advanced a screening force of light infantry and cavalry toward the obvious crossing point, drawing Persian attention and confirming their expectation of a conventional frontal assault. The Persians reinforced this sector, concentrating their cavalry precisely where Alexander wanted them. Then the geometry shifted. Alexander led his companion cavalry into the river at an oblique angle, upstream from the main Persian concentration. The wedge formation, a triangular deployment with its apex forward, allowed successive ranks to support the leading edge while maintaining forward momentum. The water, chest deep on the horses, created enormous physical resistance. The current threatened to break formation cohesion. Persian archers on the bank loosed volleys into the mass of struggling cavalry. The first Macedonian horsemen to reach the eastern bank met immediate counterattack. Persian cavalry crashed into the emerging wedge formation, attempting to drive it back into the river before sufficient numbers could establish a foothold. Hand-to-hand combat in these conditions descended into brutal simplicity, horses jostling for position, lances shattering, men grappling with swords once primary weapons broke. Alexander fought in the front rank. This was not symbolic leadership, but tactical necessity in cavalry combat, where the commander's position determined the direction and momentum of the charge. A Persian nobleman, Spithridates, broke through the press and swung his scimitar at Alexander's head. The blow landed, splitting the king's helmet and drawing blood. As Spithridates raised his weapon for a killing stroke, Cletus the Black, commander of the royal squadron, drove his lance through the Persian's torso. This moment, preserved in multiple sources with unusual consistency, illustrated the quantum of violence in ancient cavalry combat. Engagements were decided not by formations maintaining disciplined order, but by the raw physics of armored men and animals colliding at speed, where individual acts of violence accumulated into tactical outcome. The phalanx brigades began their crossing once Alexander's cavalry had established sufficient frontage. The Persian cavalry, now engaged with growing numbers of companion horsemen, could not effectively interdict the phalanx advance. The pezzotteroi emerged from the water and began the complex process of reforming their files. The sarissa, unwieldy in individual combat, became devastatingly effective once 16 ranks could present their overlapping spear tips. The Persian defensive concept collapsed under this combination. Their cavalry, designed for shock action against disordered infantry, found themselves facing a steadily expanding formation of heavy cavalry supported by an impenetrable pike wall. Memnon of Rhodes, recognizing the deteriorating situation, committed his Greek mercenary reserve. These hoplites represented the finest infantry available to the Persians' professional soldiers fighting in the traditional Greek style with large shields and thrusting spears. The mercenary advance briefly stabilized the Persian line. Their discipline and equipment allowed them to engage the Macedonian phalanx on more equal terms. But Alexander had created the tactical space for a devastating maneuver. With the Persian cavalry now committed across the front and their mercenary reserve locked in combat with the phalanx, he led his companion cavalry in a sweeping charge against the exposed Persian command group. When Alexander's cavalry killed or scattered these commanders, their formations lost coordinating capacity. Individual units, unable to receive orders or assess the larger tactical situation, began withdrawing independently. The withdrawal became a rout. Persian cavalry fled eastward toward the interior. The Greek mercenaries, abandoned by their employers, formed a defensive circle and attempted to surrender. Alexander, in a decision that revealed his political calculation, ordered their annihilation. Of approximately 2,000 mercenaries, only a few hundred survived to be sent as slaves to Macedonia. The message was calibrated for Greek city-states considering resistance. Service to Persia against Greeks carried no mercy. Macedonian casualties numbered approximately 115 dead, remarkably light for a frontal river, crossing against numerically superior forces. Persian losses exceeded 4,000, including substantial portions of the satrapal cavalry that formed the empire's western military establishment. The tactical analysis reveals why this engagement became a template for subsequent battles. Alexander had identified and exploited the fundamental difference between Persian and Macedonian military systems. The Persians conceived warfare as separate elements: cavalry, infantry, archers operating in sequence. The Macedonians had developed true combined arms doctrine, where different unit types operated in synchronized support. The Granicus demonstrated that doctrine in compressed form, cavalry creating penetration, infantry securing the breakthrough, and the integration of both arms preventing effective enemy response. More significantly, it validated Alexander's strategic calculation that aggressive, immediate action could overcome local tactical disadvantages through superior operational tempo. The victory opened Anatolia to Macedonian advance. The Persian defensive system in the west depended on the satrapal armies that had just been destroyed. With their defeat, dozens of cities opened their gates without resistance. The strategic effect exceeded the tactical victory. Alexander had not merely won a battle but had shattered the military architecture of Persian control over their western territories. The river crossing at Granicus established patterns that would repeat across a decade of campaigns. Alexander's willingness to accept tactical risk for strategic advantage, his use of the companion cavalry as a precision instrument of breakthrough, and his integration of combined arms into seamless operational design all emerged fully formed in this first major engagement. The War of Hellenization had begun with a masterclass in offensive conception. November 333 BCE presented Darius III Kodomanes, king of kings and ruler of the Persian Empire, with a problem of imperial geometry. His adversary, Alexander of Macedon, had spent 18 months systematically dismantling Persian control over Anatolia, capturing coastal cities and eliminating the empire's naval bases. The strategic situation demanded response, but the terrain of southern Anatolia constrained operational choices into a narrow corridor between mountains and sea. The plain of Issus, located near modern-day Iskenderun in Turkey, measured approximately 3,000 meters wide at its broadest point. The Pinaros River, a shallow watercourse flowing from the Amanus Mountains to the Mediterranean, bisected this plain north to south. This geographical compression transformed what might have been a war of maneuver into a collision of mass against mass, denying the Persians their traditional advantages in cavalry numbers and operational depth. Darius commanded a force estimated between 80,000 and 100,000 combatants. Modern scholarship treats ancient numerical claims with appropriate skepticism, but the Persian force certainly achieved substantial numerical superiority. The royal army represented the empire's military architecture in comprehensive form. At its core stood the Immortals, 10,000 Persian and Median heavy infantry serving as the king's personal guard. These troops fought in formations resembling Greek hoplites, with large wicker shields and thrusting spears representing Persia's adoption of infantry shock tactics. The cavalry arm divided into multiple components. The Persian heavy cavalry, approximately 6,000 horsemen equipped with scale armor and kontos lances, formed the primary striking force. Light cavalry, approximately 10,000 horse archers and javelin-armed skirmishers, provided screening and harassment capabilities. An additional 15,000 cavalry came from Bactrian, Scythian, and other eastern satrapies, representing the empire's vastness but also the coordination challenges inherent in forces drawn from multiple military traditions. Greek mercenary hoplites, approximately 12,000 men under commanders who had escaped the Granicus, provided the army's most reliable infantry. These professionals fought for Persian gold but maintained Greek tactical doctrine. Their presence illustrated the empire's practical approach to military effectiveness, hiring expertise where indigenous forces lacked capability. Alexander's force had expanded to approximately 40,000 men through reinforcements from Macedonia and recruitment of allied Greek forces. His order of battle remained fundamentally unchanged from Granicus. The companion cavalry, now organized into 8 squadrons totaling approximately 1,800 horsemen, held the right wing under his personal command. The phalanx brigades, approximately 12,000 pezziteroi, occupied the center. The left wing combined Thessalian cavalry, approximately 1,800 horsemen, with allied Greek infantry under Parmenian's command. The tactical situation preceding the battle demonstrated the operational risks inherent in Alexander's aggressive tempo. He had advanced south through the Cilician Gates, a mountain pass controlling access to southern Anatolia, expecting to meet Darius in the open plains near Sachi. Instead, Darius executed an unexpected maneuver. While Alexander moved south, the Persian army passed through the Amanus Mountains via alternate routes and emerged in Alexander's rear, cutting his line of communication. This maneuver, often dismissed as Darius's attempt to force battle, actually represented sophisticated operational thinking. By positioning his superior numbers in the constricted terrain at Issus, Darius negated Alexander's tactical flexibility while simultaneously threatening the Macedonian logistics base. Alexander faced a choice between retreating back through the Cilician gates, effectively abandoning his campaign, or attacking a numerically superior force holding prepared positions. Alexander chose to attack, but the battlefield geometry imposed significant modifications to his standard tactical template. The constricted frontage prevented the wide, sweeping cavalry maneuvers that had characterized Granicus. Instead, both armies would fight compressed against each other, limiting opportunities for elaborate tactical sophistication. Darius positioned his forces with careful attention to the terrain's constraints. The Greek mercenaries held the center, immediately south of the Pinarus River, where they could engage Alexander's phalanx directly. The Persian heavy cavalry deployed on the right wing, coastal side, where they faced Parmenian and the Thessalian cavalry. The left-wing cavalry, positioned on the mountainside, would engage Alexander's companions. The Immortals and remaining Persian infantry formed a second line, providing depth and reserve capacity. The Persians modified the terrain to enhance their defensive position. Work parties had erected a wooden palisade along their side of the riverbank in the center sector, creating an improvised fieldwork that would disrupt phalanx cohesion during their crossing. Archers positioned behind this barrier could shoot into the attacking Macedonians, while protected from direct assault. Alexander's approach to this tactical problem revealed his capacity for adaptive planning. The standard oblique attack concentrating force on one wing, while refusing the other, would not work effectively in this compressed space. Instead, he designed a synchronized assault across the entire front, with differential timing to create sequential pressure on the Persian formation. The engagement opened with a protracted archery duel as both armies maneuvered into final positions. Persian horse archers harassed the Macedonian advance, attempting to disorder formations before contact. Macedonian archers and light infantry, including Agrianon's javelin-armed troops from Thrace, renowned for their mobility, contested the riverbank and suppressed Persian archery. Alexander initiated the decisive movement. Leading the companion cavalry, he drove forward at the oblique angle that had succeeded at Granicus, but this time against the Persian left-wing cavalry rather than attempting a deep envelopment. The geographical compression meant that breakthrough would come through violence of action rather than maneuver elegance. The cavalry collision occurred at the river crossing. The Pinarus, shallower than the Granicus, still disrupted formation cohesion during the crossing. Persian cavalry met the companions in the stream, attempting to prevent them from establishing secure footing on the southern bank. The fighting devolved into grinding attrition horses struggling in the current, lances breaking on impact, men falling into the water under the weight of armor. Simultaneously, the phalanx brigades advanced toward the river. The Persians had calculated correctly. The wooden palisade and riverbank obstacles disrupted the Sarissa formation's cohesion. Units crossed at different speeds, creating gaps in the previously seamless pike wall. The Greek mercenaries, recognizing this vulnerability, counterattacked immediately. The center of the battlefield became a zone of tactical crisis for the Macedonians. Phalanx brigades, disordered by the crossing and separated from each other by terrain irregularities, fought individual engagements against mercenary hoplites who maintained better formation cohesion. The Sarissa's reach advantage diminished in broken terrain where formations could not maintain their depth. Some phalanx units were driven back across the river, threatening to create a penetration of the Macedonian center. On the Macedonian left wing, the situation approached disaster. Persian heavy cavalry, exploiting the phalanx's disorder and the gap created between the center and left formations, drove forward in a mass charge. Parmenian's Thessalian cavalry found themselves outnumbered and under severe pressure. The Persian cavalry penetrated beyond the front line, reaching the Macedonian baggage train in the rear areas. The battle balanced on multiple simultaneous tactical decisions. On the right, Alexander had achieved what he required. The Persian left-wing cavalry, after fierce resistance, began to fragment under sustained pressure from the companion cavalry and supporting infantry. But his phalanx center remained locked in crisis and his left wing faced potential collapse. Alexander made his characteristic decision: expand success rather than reinforce failure. Instead of pulling back to restore his center, he drove his cavalry deeper into the Persian left, wheeling them gradually from a northward attack to an eastward one, beginning to roll up the Persian line from the flank. This maneuver placed enormous trust in his phalanx brigade's resilience. They had to survive the mercenary pressure without direct assistance while their commander-in-chief was pursuing a separate action. The tactical risk was considerable. If the phalanx broke before Alexander could complete his flanking movement, the battle would become a catastrophe. The phalanx brigades demonstrated the institutional quality of Philip's military reforms. Despite disorder, despite casualties, despite fighting at a disadvantage, they maintained local cohesion and continued engaging the mercenaries. Subordinate commanders, the brigadiers, and file leaders maintained sufficient control to prevent panic and coordinate mutual support between units. The Persian formation began to fracture. Alexander's cavalry, now attacking from the flank and rear, reached the position where Darius commanded from his chariot, a symbol of royal authority but a tactical liability in fluid combat. Persian sources and Greek accounts agree on the essential fact: Darius, perceiving the collapse of his left and the approach of enemy cavalry toward his position, ordered retreat. The king's departure initiated systemic failure of Persian command structure. Units across the battlefield, seeing the royal standard withdrawing, lost confidence in the battle's outcome. The Greek mercenaries, professional soldiers with no particular loyalty to Persia beyond their contracts, recognized their isolation and began fighting withdrawal actions. The Persian right-wing cavalry, which had been successfully pressing Parmenion and threatening the Macedonian rear, found themselves in an untenable position. Their own army was retreating, but they were deep in enemy rear areas. The withdrawal became a fighting retreat, with the Salian cavalry harrying their movement but unable to prevent most units from disengaging. The pursuit extended for kilometers. Alexander, recognizing that destroying the Persian field army mattered more than holding the battlefield, led his cavalry in direct pursuit of Darius himself. The chase continued until darkness made further movement impractical. Darius escaped, abandoning his chariot and switching to horseback to increase speed, a humiliation that Persian court protocol would normally render unthinkable. Macedonian casualties totaled approximately 500 dead, remarkable given the scale of fighting and the crisis in the center. Persian losses remain subject to ancient exaggeration, but modern estimates suggest 20,000 to 30,000 dead, with additional thousands captured. More significantly, the Persians lost their field army's organizational integrity. The royal army, gathered from across the empire, had been shattered. Alexander captured the Persian royal camp, including Darius's family, his mother Hydaspes, his wife Statera, and his children. The treatment of these captives became a propaganda element. Alexander ordered them treated with royal dignity, a gesture calculated to demonstrate his claim not as a foreign conqueror but as legitimate successor to Persian sovereignty. The tactical analysis reveals the battle's significance beyond the immediate victory. Issus demonstrated that numerical superiority could not overcome the combined arms integration and tactical discipline of the Macedonian system. The Persians had deployed more soldiers, held prepared positions, and achieved initial success on one wing. Yet they lost because their army functioned as separate components: cavalry, infantry, archers, rather than as an integrated system. The Macedonian system proved resilient under pressure. The phalanx, despite disorder and disadvantage, maintained sufficient cohesion to prevent catastrophic breakthrough. The command structure, despite Alexander's absence during the center crisis, functioned adequately through subordinate initiative. The combined arms concept cavalry breakthrough supported by infantry exploitation produced victory even when initial execution encountered significant friction. Strategically, Issus transformed the war's character. Darius had committed his prestige and his field army to battle and had lost both. The empire's military reputation suffered catastrophic damage. Egyptian and Phoenician satrapies, witnessing this defeat, began calculating whether continued loyalty to Persia served their interests. The path to Egypt lay open. The war of conquest expanded in scope from Anatolia to the entire eastern Mediterranean littoral. The constricted battlefield at Issus had forced concentration of violence into a limited space, stripping away maneuver options and reducing warfare to a brutal test of tactical systems and unit cohesion. The Macedonian system had passed that test. The Persian Empire, despite its vast resources and numerical advantages, had failed to develop military institutions capable of matching Philip's revolutionary military architecture. That institutional gap, more than any individual commander's genius, determined the battle's outcome and predicted the trajectory of campaigns to come. The city of Tyre in 332 BCE presented Alexander with a problem categorically different from the field battles that had characterized his campaign thus far. This ancient Phoenician metropolis occupied a fortified island approximately 800 meters offshore from the mainland settlement. Its walls rose directly from the sea, 40 meters high, constructed from stone blocks quarried and set over centuries of continuous habitation. The city had withstood multiple sieges throughout its history, including a 30-year Babylonian investment under Nebuchadnezzar II that had ended in negotiated settlement rather than capture. Tyre represented more than a tactical obstacle. As the primary naval base of the Phoenician fleet serving Persian interests, its continued operation threatened Alexander's entire strategic position. Persian naval superiority in the eastern Mediterranean meant that bypassing Tyre would leave hostile naval forces operating against Macedonian supply lines and potentially supporting Persian forces in Greece itself. The campaign could not proceed to Egypt while Tyre remained unconquered. Alexander initiated the siege in January 332 BCE with forces totaling approximately 40,000 men, though most would not directly participate in assault operations. His engineering capacity remained limited by ancient standards. The Macedonian army possessed skilled artificers and craftsmen, but siege warfare on this scale pushed beyond established doctrine. The initial tactical concept centered on constructing a moorland artificial causeway extending from the mainland to the island. This solution reflected the fundamental constraint: without naval superiority, Alexander could not blockade Tyre or launch direct amphibious assault. The mole would convert a naval problem into a land warfare problem by literally eliminating the water barrier. The engineering undertaking ranks among antiquity's most ambitious military constructions. The mole required approximately 200 meters of causeway built through water reaching depths of 5 to 6 meters near the island's walls. Engineers drove wooden pilings into the seabed to create a framework, then filled the space between with stones and rubble. The width expanded as construction progressed, eventually reaching 60 meters at its broadest to accommodate siege towers and multiple assault lanes. Material sourcing became a logistical enterprise of enormous scale. The mainland settlement of Tyre provided initial building materials, its structures systematically demolished to supply stone for the causeway. As these sources depleted, work parties ranged across the surrounding region, quarrying stone and transporting it to the construction site. Ancient sources suggest tens of thousands of cubic meters of stone went into the mole's construction. Tyrian response demonstrated sophisticated understanding of siege engineering countermeasures. The defenders possessed numerical superiority in naval forces, with their fleet of warships capable of attacking the causeway from both sides. Initial attacks targeted the construction workers, forcing Alexander to deploy screens of archers and light infantry to suppress Tyrian harassment. As the mole approached closer to the island's walls, Tyrian tactics escalated. Engineers launched a fire ship, a sacrificial vessel loaded with combustible materials, against the mole seaward end where Alexander had positioned 2 siege towers. The towers, constructed from timber and standing significantly taller than the mole itself to provide elevated firing positions, represented weeks of engineering effort. The fireship, aided by favorable winds, reached the towers and ignited them. The timber construction created an inferno that destroyed both towers and damaged a significant section of the completed mole. Simultaneously, Tyrian warships attacked from both sides, landing troops who killed Macedonian soldiers attempting to fight the fire and destroyed additional sections of the engineering work. The setback cost weeks of construction progress and demonstrated that the mole alone could not succeed without addressing the naval dimension. Alexander's response illustrated strategic adaptation under operational constraint. He dispatched diplomatic missions to Sidon, Aratus, and other Phoenician cities that had recently submitted to Macedonian authority, demanding they provide their fleets for operations against Tyre. Simultaneously, he negotiated with Cyprus, whose city-states supplied warships to add to the growing naval force. This diplomatic construction of naval power required months. While negotiations proceeded, Alexander modified his siege approach. Rather than continuing the mole construction immediately, he shifted priorities to building additional siege equipment on a scale exceeding the lost towers. Engineering workshops across the region produced siege towers, battering rams, and artillery pieces, catapults, and ballistae capable of launching stone projectiles and bolts against defenders. The arrival of the Phoenician and Cypriot fleets in late summer 332 BCE transformed the siege dynamics. Alexander now commanded approximately 200 warships, establishing local naval superiority. The Tyrian fleet, approximately 80 vessels, found itself outnumbered and confined to Tyre's harbors, one on the north side of the island facing Sidon, one on the south facing Egypt. With naval superiority established, the mole construction resumed with reduced harassment. Engineers repaired the fire-damaged sections and continued extension toward the island. The causeway's seaward end widened to accommodate multiple siege towers simultaneously, creating a platform for concentrated firepower against Tyre's walls. The final assault plan integrated multiple attack vectors. The mole provided the primary assault axis, but Alexander positioned his fleet to launch simultaneous attacks against the island's walls from multiple directions. Warships carried siege equipment, battering rams mounted on reinforced hulls, boarding bridges that could be lowered onto wall tops from specially constructed platforms. The engineering sophistication extended to the siege artillery. Catapults, positioned on the mole and on reinforced warships, bombarded specific sections of the wall with stone projectiles weighing up to 25 kilograms. The sustained bombardment aimed not merely to kill defenders but to fracture the stone masonry, creating breaches through which assault troops could penetrate. Tyrian defenders demonstrated corresponding technical competence. They constructed additional walls behind sections where Macedonian bombardment had created damage, creating multiple defensive lines. They deployed their own artillery, including drop-weights, massive stones suspended above the walls that could be released onto attacking rams and towers. They lowered nets and flexible barriers to catch incoming projectiles and reduce impact energy. The decisive assault came in July 332 BCE, after 7 months of siege operations. Alexander personally commanded the mole assault, leading troops from the siege towers once they had closed with the walls. Simultaneously, naval forces under Admetus and Coenus launched coordinated attacks from the southern harbor side, where a section of wall had been identified as vulnerable. The naval assault achieved breakthrough first. Battering rams mounted on specially reinforced warships succeeded in creating a practicable breach in the southern wall. Assault troops, Hydaspes, elite infantry trained for precisely this type of close-quarters combat, crossed from ships to the breach using gangplanks and boarding bridges. The fighting inside the breach concentrated violence into a narrow frontage. Tyrian defenders, fighting for their city's survival and their own lives, contested every meter of the breach. The Hydaspes, equipped with shorter spears and swords more suitable for close combat than the Sarissa, pushed through sustained casualties to expand the breach and create space for additional units to enter. Alexander, recognizing that the naval assault had achieved penetration, redirected forces from the mole to support the exploitation. The mole assault, while not achieving its own breach, had fixed Tyrian defenders and prevented them from reinforcing the southern wall sector. The tactical concept of multiple simultaneous attacks had created the condition for success. The defenders could not concentrate sufficient forces to contain the breach while also defending against other threats. The collapse of the defensive perimeter initiated the siege's final phase. Tyrian forces withdrew from the walls into the city's interior, attempting to organize a house-to-house defense. The Macedonian assault, however, maintained sufficient momentum to prevent effective reorganization. Units penetrating through the breach pushed outward along the wall's interior, opening additional entry points and allowing more assault forces to enter. The fighting devolved into systematic clearance of the city's sectors. Tyrian defenders, recognizing the hopelessness of their situation, either surrendered or fought to the death. Alexander's forces, following standard practice in cities taken by storm, killed military-age males and enslaved the remaining population. Ancient sources report 8,000 Tyrians killed in the final assault, with 30,000 enslaved. 2,000 prisoners, identified as leaders of the resistance, were crucified along the coastal road as a demonstration to other cities considering resistance. The tactical analysis reveals why this siege became a landmark in military engineering. Alexander had confronted a problem that combined naval, engineering, and conventional assault challenges. His solution required 7 months of sustained effort, the construction of a massive causeway that permanently altered the coastal geography, the assembly of a fleet through diplomatic means, and the integration of that fleet into coordinated assault operations. The casualty figures, while horrific by modern standards, followed ancient convention for cities taken by storm. Cities that surrendered received clemency. Cities that resisted to the end faced annihilation. The massacre at Tyre served strategic communication. Other cities along the route to Egypt would calculate whether resistance offered any benefit when measured against certain destruction. The siege demonstrated Alexander's capacity for sustained operations against objectives that could not be overcome through tactical brilliance or aggressive maneuvering. Tyre required patience, resource mobilization, technical innovation, and the coordination of multiple specialized capabilities over an extended timeline. These qualities, often overshadowed by the spectacular field victories, proved equally essential to the campaign's success. The permanent causeway remains visible in modern times, now expanded by sediment accumulation into a broad land bridge. This physical legacy illustrates how military engineering, undertaken for immediate tactical purposes, can produce geographical changes that persist across millennia. Strategically, Tyre's fall eliminated the primary Persian naval base in the eastern Mediterranean. The Phoenician fleet, whose home ports now answered to Macedonian authority, ceased operations against Alexander's interests. The route to Egypt lay completely open, with no remaining obstacles between Alexander's army and the Nile Delta. The siege had consumed 7 months, but those 7 months secured the campaign's maritime flank and transformed the strategic balance in the eastern Mediterranean theater. The plain near Gaugamela in northern Mesopotamia, selected by Darius III personally, represented the Persian Empire's final strategic investment in military decision. The location, approximately 90 kilometers from modern Mosul, offered terrain ideally suited to Persian tactical preferences: flat, open ground extending for kilometers in all directions, allowing unrestricted deployment of cavalry and chariots. Darius had spent months assembling forces from across the empire's vast expanse, creating an army that exceeded any force previously fielded in ancient warfare. The strategic context preceding this confrontation shaped both armies' operational choices. Following his defeat at Issus, Darius had retreated to Babylon and then to Susa, using the empire's interior communications to gather reinforcements. Alexander, after securing Egypt in early 331 BCE, where he had founded Alexandria, and received confirmation of his divinity at the Oracle of Ammon, marched east across the Levant and into Mesopotamia. The Persian strategy centered on forcing a decisive engagement under conditions, maximizing their advantages in cavalry numbers and military depth. Darius commanded an army estimated between 80,000 and 120,000 combatants. Ancient sources inflate these numbers substantially, but even conservative modern scholarship acknowledges Persian numerical superiority of approximately 2-to-1. The force represented the empire's military diversity. The Immortals and Persian heavy infantry, approximately 20,000 men, anchored the center. The cavalry arm exceeded 30,000 horsemen drawn from satrapies across the empire, Bactrian heavy cavalry in scale armor, Scythian horse archers, Indian cavalry from the eastern provinces, and Persian noble cavalry forming the core striking force. The Persian order of battle included specialized elements designed specifically to counter Macedonian tactical advantages. Approximately 200 scythed chariots war machines equipped with blade, Extensions from their wheels and axles would charge the Macedonian phalanx, attempting to create disorder through fear and physical disruption. 15 war elephants from the Indian satrapies, animals unfamiliar to European troops, would provide shock value and disrupt cavalry formations. The tactical concept integrated these specialized weapons with conventional forces to create multiple simultaneous threats that would overwhelm Macedonian coordination. Darius had prepared the battlefield itself. Engineering units leveled sections of the plain, removing obstacles and creating cleared lanes for chariot charges. This preparation revealed sophisticated understanding of combined arms. Employment: the chariots required specific terrain conditions to be effective, and creating those conditions through deliberate engineering demonstrated operational planning rather than merely tactical positioning. Alexander's army numbered approximately 47,000 men, including reinforcements received during the Egyptian interlude. The companion cavalry had expanded to approximately 2,000 horsemen organized into 8 squadrons. The phalanx comprised 6 brigades of approximately 12,000 pezziteroi, maintaining the sarissa and dense formation that had proven effective in previous engagements. The left wing combined Thessalian cavalry with allied Greek cavalry, totaling approximately 3,000 horsemen. Thracian and Paeonian light cavalry, approximately 1,000 horsemen, provided screening and pursuit capacity. The Macedonian deployment reflected Alexander's recognition that numerical disadvantage required defensive preparation alongside offensive capacity. For the first time in the campaign, he organized his army in 2 lines. The second line, composed of mercenary Greek infantry and allied phalanx brigades, would face outward to the rear if Persian cavalry achieved envelopment. This deployment acknowledged the tactical reality the Persians possessed sufficient numerical superiority to overlap both Macedonian flanks simultaneously. The battle commenced at dawn on October 1, 331 BCE. Persian cavalry on both wings began the envelopment movement that their numerical superiority enabled. The Scythian and Bactrian cavalry on the Persian left moved to outflank Alexander's right wing. Persian and allied cavalry on the right wing began similar operations against Parmenions' left. Darius initiated the scythed chariot charge, 200 vehicles advancing at increasing speed toward the Macedonian phalanx. The tactical effect, however, deviated sharply from Persian expectations. Macedonian light infantry Agrianerons and archers had deployed in front of the phalanx specifically to counter this threat. As the chariots approached, these troops opened lanes in their formations, allowing many chariots to pass through harmlessly, then engage the vehicles with missiles and close combat. The phalanx itself opened similar lanes when chariots reached their front. Of 200 chariots launched, the vast majority caused no significant casualties. The few that reached the phalanx found that the sarissa's length prevented horses from closing with the formation. Animals will not charge into solid walls of spear points. The failure of the chariot attack removed a key component of the Persian tactical plan. The chariots were intended to disorder the phalanx, creating vulnerabilities that the cavalry and infantry would exploit. Without that disorder, the Persian center faced an intact phalanx formation that remained a formidable defensive obstacle. Alexander initiated his decisive maneuver. Beating the companion cavalry, he advanced at an oblique angle toward the Persian left-wing cavalry. This movement appeared to be standard Macedonian doctrine, the right-wing cavalry breakthrough that had succeeded at Granicus and Issus. The Persian left-wing cavalry moved to counter, extending their line to prevent envelopment. The movement created a gap. As the Persian left wing extended to match Alexander's advance, separation developed between the cavalry and the Persian center infantry. This gap measured several hundred meters, sufficient space for exploitation, but requiring precise timing and coordination to penetrate before Persian reserves could close it. Alexander had designed the entire maneuver to create exactly this condition. The oblique advance was not the main attack, but the shaping operation. When the gap opened, he executed a sharp turn, redirecting his cavalry from the left wing toward the gap itself. The companion cavalry, followed by Hydaspes infantry and a phalanx brigade, drove into the penetration. The Persian formation experienced catastrophic coordination failure. The left-wing cavalry, committed to countering what appeared to be Alexander's main attack, found themselves out of position when he redirected. The center infantry, expecting to engage the Macedonian phalanx directly, suddenly faced a cavalry assault from their flank. The tactical geometry that had seemed favorable numerical superiority across the entire front transformed into vulnerability once the formation's integrity broke. Alexander drove his cavalry directly toward Darius's command position. This was not symbolic targeting, but tactical necessity. Persian armies, like most ancient forces, maintained coherence through visual contact with command standards and direct communication from commanders. Reaching Darius meant fracturing the army's command structure. The Persian center attempted to pivot to face the penetration, but formations in ancient warfare could not redeploy quickly under pressure. The immortals and heavy infantry, configured for frontal combat against the phalanx, found themselves attacked from an unexpected axis by cavalry they were not positioned to counter. On the Macedonian left wing, however, the situation approached disaster. Persian cavalry had successfully enveloped Parmenions' position. Indian and Persian cavalry units had penetrated behind the Macedonian front line, reaching the baggage train and threatening the army's rear. Parmenion dispatched urgent messages to Alexander requesting support. This moment crystallized Alexander's command philosophy. Despite the crisis on his left, despite the direct request from his most senior subordinate, he continued driving the penetration. The decision reflected his understanding of ancient battle mechanics. The outcome would be determined by which side's command structure collapsed first, not by control of specific terrain or successful tactical movements on secondary fronts. Darius, witnessing Alexander's cavalry approaching his position and the disintegration of units in the center, made the same decision he had made at Issus. He ordered retreat. The king's departure from the battlefield initiated immediate and catastrophic command failure. Persian units across the front, seeing the royal standard withdrawing, lost confidence in the battle's outcome. The Greek mercenary infantry in the Persian center, approximately 10,000 professional soldiers, had been fighting successfully against the Macedonian phalanx. When Darius retreated, these units recognized their isolation and began fighting withdrawal. The Persian left-wing cavalry, which had been holding against the companion cavalry's initial attacks, found their center collapsed and their king retreating. They disengaged and began withdrawal. The Persian right-wing cavalry, which had achieved the greatest tactical success, found themselves in an untenable position. They had penetrated deep into the Macedonian rear, but their own army was now retreating. The Thessalian cavalry and Parmenians' infantry, despite the pressure they had faced, maintained sufficient cohesion to prevent the Persian cavalry from escaping easily. Many of these Persian units fought their way out through sustained combat, but suffered heavy casualties during withdrawal. Alexander pursued Darius directly, leading his cavalry in a chase that extended for over 30 kilometers. The pursuit demonstrated the companion cavalry's conditioning after hours of combat. They maintained sufficient cohesion and energy to conduct sustained pursuit operations. Darius again escaped, abandoning his chariot and switching to horseback, but the pursuit scattered the Persian forces and prevented any possibility of rallying. Macedonian casualties totaled approximately 500 dead, remarkable given the scale of the engagement and the crisis on the left wing. Persian losses remain subject to ancient exaggeration, but modern estimates suggest 30,000 to 40,000 dead and wounded, with additional thousands captured during the pursuit and subsequent days. The tactical analysis reveals Gaugamela as the culmination of Alexander's operational art. He had identified that Persian numerical superiority required defensive preparation, hence the two-line formation, but that victory demanded offensive action against the enemy's command structure. The oblique advance, the penetration through the gap, the direct attack on Darius represented calculated design to create command collapse. The Persian tactical system again demonstrated its fundamental limitation. Despite superior numbers, better terrain, specialized weapons designed specifically to counter Macedonian tactics, and a commander who had learned from previous defeats, the Persian army could not overcome the Macedonian integrated combined arms system. When their specialized weapons failed, when their formations faced attacks from unexpected axes, they lacked the tactical flexibility and command resilience to adapt. Strategically, Gaugamela destroyed the Persian Empire's capacity for military resistance. Darius had assembled the largest force possible, chosen ideal terrain, and still suffered catastrophic defeat. The empire's military reputation collapsed irreparably. Babylon opened its gates to Alexander without resistance. Susa surrendered. Persepolis, the ceremonial capital, fell within months. Darius himself would be murdered by his own satraps in 330 BCE, hoping to gain favor with the conqueror. The battle demonstrated that the war of Hellenization had transcended mere conquest. Alexander was not simply defeating Persian armies but dismantling the institutional framework that had sustained the empire for 2 centuries. The Macedonian military system, its combined arms doctrine, its command structure that functioned despite the king's absence from critical sectors, its tactical flexibility represented a more advanced military architecture than the Persian system could match with numbers alone. The campaign as continuation beyond Gaugamela transformed Alexander's operational challenge from defeating conventional armies to projecting power across continental distances under extreme logistical and environmental constraints. The pursuit of Bessus, the satrap who had murdered Darius and claimed the Persian throne, required crossing the Hindu Kush mountain range in early spring 329 BCE. The passage, undertaken at altitudes exceeding 4,000 meters, inflicted casualties through altitude sickness and cold exposure that exceeded losses in several major battles. The logistical architecture sustaining these operations demanded systematic attention to supply lines extending over 2,000 kilometers from Macedonia to Bactria. Alexander established a network of garrison cities throughout the conquered territories, each serving as a logistics node, communications relay, and power projection base. These foundations, many named Alexandria, represented not mere vanity but operational infrastructure. They secured lines of communication, suppressed local resistance, and provided recruiting bases for reinforcements. Bactria and Sogdiana, the northeastern satrapies comprising modern Afghanistan and Uzbekistan, presented operational problems distinct from the previous campaigns. The population possessed martial traditions and terrain knowledge that enabled sustained guerrilla resistance. Spitamines, a Sogdian warlord, conducted mobile operations that repeatedly defeated Macedonian detachments, most notably destroying a 2,000-man force under Menedaimus in 329 BC. Alexander's response combined systematic area pacification with the construction of fortified settlements. 8 additional garrison cities were established across Bactria and Sogdiana between 329 and 327 BCE, each positioned to control river crossings or mountain passes critical to military movement. The garrisons, composed primarily of Greek mercenaries and Macedonian veterans, considered too old for field operations, numbered approximately 15,000 men. Distributed across the region, the campaign gradually pacified the region through combinations of military pressure and political accommodation. Alexander's marriage to Roxana, daughter of the Bactrian nobleman Oxyartes, in 327 BCE represented not romantic interest, but calculated alliance building with local power structures. The integration of Bactrian and Sogdian cavalry into the Macedonian order of battle, approximately 5,000 horsemen added to the army, provided both military capability and political connection to local populations. The advance into India in 326 BCE encountered military systems fundamentally different from Mediterranean or Persian warfare. The kingdoms beyond the Indus River had developed tactical doctrines centered on war elephants, animals standing 3 to 4 meters at the shoulder. The kingdoms beyond the Indus River crews of soldiers armed with javelins and bows on war. Elephants, animals standing 3 to 4 meters at the shoulder, carrying crews of soldiers armed with javelins and bows, and capable of disrupting cavalry and infantry formations 85 through their physical presence and psychological impact. River in May 326 BCE, positioning them as mobile strongpoints integrated with his infantry and cavalry. His army, estimated at 40,000 men, occupied the eastern bank of the Hydaspes, modern Jhelum River, a watercourse swollen by monsoon rains to depths exceeding 5 meters with currents that precluded simple crossing operations. Alexander faced a river crossing problem more complex than the Granicus. The river's width and current meant that any crossing would require extended time to transfer forces, during which units on the eastern bank would be vulnerable to attack before sufficient numbers accumulated. Porus's deployment directly opposite the Macedonian camp ensured that any crossing attempt would face immediate opposition from his full force. The solution combined deception operations with operational planning. Alexander conducted multiple feint crossings over several days, moving troops to the riverbank, loading transport boats, and creating noise suggesting imminent crossing. Porus responded by moving his forces to counter each feint. After sufficient repetitions, the Indian forces began treating these movements as routine harassment rather than genuine crossing attempts. While conducting these feints, Alexander identified a crossing point approximately 25 kilometers upstream, where a river bend and wooded island would conceal troop movements. He selected approximately 11,000 infantry and 5,000 cavalry for the actual crossing, leaving Granicus with substantial forces at the main camp to conduct a third diversionary crossing once battle was joined downstream. The crossing occurred at night during a severe thunderstorm. The precipitation and darkness concealed the troop movements, while the storm's noise masked the sounds of boats crossing the river. The wooded island divided the crossing into two stages, allowing troops to rest midway and reorganize before completing the transit. Porus detected the crossing by dawn and faced a decision between dividing his forces or concentrating against one threat. He dispatched his son with approximately 10,000 men and 30 chariots to intercept Alexander's forces while maintaining his main position against Granicus. This division proved fatal. Alexander's force defeated and killed Porus's son in a sharp engagement, then advanced downstream toward the main Indian position. Porus now faced Alexander's approaching force from upstream and Granicus beginning his crossing from the west. Rather than withdrawing to a more defensible position, Porus chose to fight where he stood, likely calculating that retreat with war elephants would be difficult and that his force retained tactical advantages. The Indian deployment positioned war elephants at regular intervals across the front, approximately 15 meters apart, creating a living wall. Infantry formations occupied the gaps between elephants, while cavalry deployed on both wings. The tactical concept relied on the elephants disrupting Macedonian formations, allowing the infantry and cavalry to exploit the disorder. Alexander modified his standard tactical approach to address the elephant threat. He refused to center, holding his phalanx back from direct engagement with the elephants. Instead, he concentrated his cavalry against the Indian cavalry on both flanks, particularly the weaker left wing. The tactical sequence aimed to defeat the Indian cavalry first, then use cavalry mobility to attack the infantry and elephants from the flanks and rear rather than frontally. The companion and allied cavalry drove forward against the Indian left-wing cavalry. The engagement developed into attritional cavalry combat. Neither side achieved immediate breakthrough, but the Macedonian advantage in training and equipment gradually imposed itself. The Indian cavalry began withdrawing under sustained pressure. As the cavalry engagement developed, Alexander coordinated the phalanx's advance. Rather than charging directly at the elephants, the peasiteroi advanced methodically, maintaining formation cohesion and using their sarissasa reach to engage the elephants from beyond the animals' effective striking range. Archers and javelin troops targeted the elephant crews, reducing the animals' tactical effectiveness. The elephants, despite their physical advantages, proved vulnerable to systematic combined arms tactics. When attacked simultaneously from multiple directions, cavalry from the flanks, phalanx from the front, light troops shooting their crews, the animals became disordered and uncontrollable. Wounded elephants panicked, trampling their own supporting infantry as they retreated. The Indian tactical system, centered on these animals, collapsed when they failed to perform their assigned function. The battle continued for 8 hours, the longest sustained combat of Alexander's campaigns. The Indian forces, despite the failure of their elephant tactics, fought with tenacity that earned Macedonian respect. Porus himself, commanding from atop an elephant, continued directing resistance until his forces had been comprehensively defeated and most of his commanders killed. Alexander offered terms. Porus, when asked how he wished to be treated, reportedly replied, "Like a king." Alexander, Recognizing both the tactical competence Paris had displayed and the political value of having a local ruler governing these territories, not only restored Paris to his throne but expanded his territories. This clemency represented strategic calculation. Governing India directly would require enormous military investment, while ruling through accommodated local powers could provide stability at lower cost. The tactical analysis reveals the Hydaspes as demonstrating Alexander's adaptive capacity. He faced an unfamiliar tactical system: war elephants integrated into combined arms, formations in terrain that complicated his standard maneuvers. The solution required multiple innovations: the deception operations to enable the crossing, the refuse center to avoid frontal engagement with elephants, and the sequential defeat of enemy force components rather than simultaneous engagement. The campaign's continuation beyond Hydaspes encountered limits not of military capability, but of soldier endurance. The army mutinied at the Hydaspes River in 326 BCE, refusing to march further east. Alexander had campaigned continuously for 8 years across territories spanning 3,000 kilometers. His soldiers, many middle-aged by this point, saw no end to the advance and no prospect of returning home. The mutiny illustrated a constraint that tactical brilliance could not overcome. Ancient armies operated through consent as much as discipline. Soldiers could not be indefinitely compelled to campaign when they perceived no further purpose in the effort. Alexander, after days of attempting to persuade his troops, accepted their decision and ordered withdrawal to Babylon. The logistical achievement of these campaigns equals or exceeds the tactical victories. Alexander sustained an army of 40,000 to 50,000 men across distances and terrain that challenged pre-modern logistics. The supply system combined local requisition, maritime transport up navigable rivers, and the establishment of permanent garrison cities to create supply dumps. The integration of local auxiliary forces, Bactrian cavalry. Indian infantry not only provided military capability, but reduced logistical burden by leveraging local supply networks. The campaigns in Central Asia and India expanded the geographic scope of Hellenization beyond anything previously attempted. The garrison cities became centers of Greek culture and settlement, some surviving as significant urban centers for centuries. The political accommodations with local rulers created hybrid governance systems that blended Macedonian military control with indigenous administrative structures. Strategically, these campaigns demonstrated both the reach and the limits of Alexander's military system. The Macedonian army could defeat any opponent it encountered, could operate under extreme environmental conditions, and could project power across continental distances. But it could not sustain unlimited expansion. The soldiers' mutiny at Hydaspes marked the empire's maximum extent, not because military capacity had reached its limit, but because human endurance had. The final years of Alexander's life, from the return from India in 325 BCE to his death in Babylon in June 323 BCE, focused on consolidating the conquests into a stable imperial structure. This phase lacked the dramatic tactical engagements of the earlier campaigns, but revealed Alexander's conception of empire building beyond mere military occupation. The return from India involved a punitive desert crossing through the Jadrosian Desert, modern Baluchistan, that cost more casualties than any battle in the campaign. The decision to take this route rather than the more navigable coastal or northern routes reflected Alexander's desire to demonstrate military capability in terrain considered impassable. The crossing, undertaken by approximately 30,000 men and camp followers, resulted in an estimated 10,000 to 15,000 deaths from dehydration, exposure, and exhaustion. Upon reaching Babylon in 324 BCE, Alexander initiated systematic administrative reforms designed to transform military conquest into stable governance. The integration of Persian administrative practices with Macedonian military control created a hybrid system. Persian satraps retained their positions if they had submitted peacefully, but were paired with Macedonian military commanders who controlled garrison forces. The dual command structure balanced local knowledge with military reliability. The army's composition underwent deliberate transformation. Alexander ordered the training of 30,000 young Persians in Macedonian military techniques, creating units equipped and trained identically to the phalanx brigades. This force, called the Epigoni, represented both military reinforcement and political integration. By creating indigenous units capable of operating within the Macedonian tactical system, Alexander aimed to reduce dependence on ethnically Macedonian manpower while binding local populations to the imperial structure. The mass marriage ceremony at Susa in 324 BCE, where Alexander and 91 Macedonian commanders married Persian noblewomen, exemplified this integration policy. These were not casual unions but calculated political connections designed to create a Greco-Persian aristocracy with interests in maintaining the empire's unity. Alexander's own marriage to Statera, daughter of Darius III, represented this policy's highest expression, the conqueror claiming legitimacy through connection to the conquered dynasty. These policies encountered resistance from the Macedonian officer corps and rank-and-file soldiers. The mutiny at Opus in 324 BCE, when Alexander announced plans to discharge older Macedonian veterans while retaining Persian units, revealed the tensions inherent in his integration strategy. The soldiers saw themselves being replaced by the conquered peoples they had spent years fighting. Alexander's response combined symbolic gestures. He dismissed his Macedonian guard and appointed Persians to command positions with practical accommodations, eventually reconciling with the mutineers while continuing his integration policies. The military implications of these demographic and organizational changes remain a subject of scholarly debate. The Macedonian tactical system had proven superior to every opponent encountered, but that superiority derived not merely from equipment or doctrine but from institutional factors training systems. Command structures and unit cohesion developed over decades under Philip and Alexander. Whether Persian recruits trained in Macedonian techniques could replicate that effectiveness remained untested at Alexander's death. The logistical infrastructure supporting this empire represented perhaps Alexander's most enduring achievement. The garrison cities, numbering over 20 by 323 BCE, formed a network controlling key routes and regions. The royal road system inherited from the Persians, supplemented by new construction, enabled communication across the empire within weeks rather than months. Maritime routes, secured by Phoenician and Greek fleets now under Macedonian control, connected the Mediterranean to the Persian Gulf and potentially to India. The economic integration following conquest transformed trade patterns across Eurasia. The opening of previously restricted Persian territories to Greek merchants created commercial connections that persisted through subsequent centuries. The standardization of coinage across the empire, using Alexander's image and Macedonian monetary standards, facilitated this economic integration while simultaneously projecting political authority. Alexander's death in Babylon on June 10 or 11, 323 BCE, at age 32, initiated immediate imperial fragmentation. The circumstances remained disputed. Fever, possibly malaria or typhoid, developed over 10 days and proved fatal despite medical treatment. Alternative theories suggesting poisoning lack convincing evidence, though the political chaos following his death provided motive for such speculation. The succession crisis revealed that Alexander had conquered an empire, but not created sustainable institutions for its governance beyond his personal authority. His designated heir, his mentally incapacitated half-brother Aridaeus, could not exercise effective command. His posthumous son by Roxana, Alexander IV, was murdered in 310 BCE during the Wars of the Diadochi, the conflicts between Alexander's generals for control of territories. The empire fragmented into successor kingdoms, the Antigonid dynasty in Macedonia, the Seleucid Empire controlling most of the Asian territories, the Ptolemaic kingdom in Egypt, and smaller kingdoms in Anatolia and Central Asia. These states, while not maintaining Alexander's unified empire, perpetuated Hellenistic culture, Greek language, art, philosophy, and political structures across territories spanning from the Adriatic to Central Asia. The military legacy manifested in the tactical doctrines adopted by the successor kingdoms. The Seleucids maintained phalanx formations and combined arms doctrine. The Ptolemies developed sophisticated naval capabilities. The military institutions Alexander created professional standing armies, integrated combined arms, systematic logistics became standard features of Hellenistic warfare. When Rome eventually conquered these kingdoms, Roman military writers acknowledged Hellenistic tactical concepts as superior to their own legion-based system until Roman pragmatism adapted and integrated those concepts. The Hellenization process that Alexander's conquests initiated transformed the ancient world's cultural geography. Greek became the lingua franca of educated elites from the Mediterranean to India. The Greco-Bactrian kingdom in Central Asia survived until the mid-2nd century BCE, creating hybrid artistic and cultural forms that influenced regions as distant as China. The Indo-Greek kingdoms in northwestern India persisted until the 1st century CE, with Greek kings depicted on coins and inscriptions and Buddhist texts translated into Greek. The assessment of Alexander's military achievement must account for multiple dimensions. Tactically, his battles demonstrated mastery of combined arms warfare, adaptive planning, and the aggressive exploitation of enemy weaknesses. Operationally, his campaigns showed sophisticated logistics, strategic patience during extended sieges, and the capacity to project power across unprecedented distances. Institutionally, he inherited and refined Philip's military reforms, creating an army that proved superior to every opponent through combination of doctrine, equipment, training, and command structure. The limitations of his achievement became apparent after his death. The empire could not survive without the unifying figure of its creator. The integration of Persians and other conquered peoples into military and administrative structures remained incomplete at his death. The logistics system, while sophisticated for ancient standards, required continuous military presence to maintain security, making it economically unsustainable in the long term. The War of Hellenization succeeded militarily but remained incomplete politically. Alexander conquered the Persian Empire, but did not create the institutions necessary for stable governance of such vast territories. His vision of Greco-Persian fusion encountered resistance from both populations: Macedonians who saw it as betrayal of their cultural superiority, Persians who saw it as inadequate compensation for their subjugation. The modern strategic analysis identifies Alexander's campaigns as demonstrating fundamental principles that transcend their ancient context. The integration of different military capabilities into combined arms systems, the importance of logistics in enabling operational reach, the value of aggressive tempo in preventing enemy adaptation, the centrality of command and control in battle outcomes all remain relevant to military theory. The human cost of these campaigns remains difficult to calculate precisely. Conservative estimates suggest Alexander's army suffered approximately 15,000 killed in combat across the decade of campaigning, with additional thousands dying from disease, exposure, and accidents. The casualties inflicted on opposing forces exceeded 100,000 dead, with additional hundreds of thousands enslaved or displaced. The Persian Empire's population, civilian and military, suffered catastrophic losses, particularly during the sieges and punitive campaigns. The War of Hellenization transformed the ancient world's political and cultural landscape. It demonstrated that the Greek military system, refined by Philip and perfected by Alexander, represented a revolutionary advance over existing tactical doctrines. It showed that sustained offensive operations could conquer territories of continental scale if supported by adequate logistics and systematic planning. It proved that military victory alone could not create stable empires without corresponding political and institutional development. Alexander's conquests represent both the apex and the limitation of pre-modern military achievement. His army conquered an empire stretching across 3,000 kilometers in 10 years. His tactics proved superior in every engagement. His operational planning enabled campaigns in terrain and climates from Mediterranean coastal cities to Himalayan mountain passes. Yet the empire fragmented immediately upon his death, unable to maintain its unity without the single figure who had created it through force of arms and personality. The legacy persists not in the empire's political continuity, but in the cultural and military transformations it initiated. Hellenistic civilization, spread by conquest and sustained by garrison cities and hybrid populations, shaped the development of Mediterranean and Near Eastern societies for centuries. The military doctrines demonstrated in Alexander's campaigns influenced warfare through the Roman period and beyond. The concept of continental-scale empire, achieved through systematic military operations supported by sophisticated logistics, established patterns that subsequent empire builders would attempt to replicate. The War of Hellenization ended with Alexander's death in 323 BCE, but its effects continued shaping history long after the empire's fragmentation. In this sense, Alexander achieved a victory more profound than mere conquest. He transformed the cultural and military paradigms of the ancient world, creating patterns that persisted through subsequent civilizations. The canvas of history preserves few achievements as transformative as Alexander's decade of conquest. From the river crossing at Granicus to the limitless horizons at Hydaspes, these campaigns demonstrated warfare as strategic, art-precise in conception, devastating in execution, and permanent in consequence. At War Atelier, we treat military history not as spectacle, but as craft. Each battle dissected, each decision weighed, each maneuver understood through the lens of doctrine, logistics, and human endurance. If this analysis of Alexander's conquests resonated with your understanding of strategy and history, then War Atelier offers the depth you seek. Subscribe for intellectually rigorous examinations of history's defining conflicts. From ancient phalanxes to modern mechanized warfare, we illuminate the eternal principles that separate victory from defeat, conquest from collapse, legend from mere ambition. War Atelier, where military history meets strategic analysis, where the past instructs the present. Where warfare is understood as art, the battlefield awaits your study. Join us.